Hi guys, Mike the Mank here with another Warframe video, and in today's video we're going to be looking at status effects on your weapons. Which ones are the best in my opinion, and which ones you should be using and why. Now this is my opinion, disclaimer again, I am using the Moonbeam and this is to basically get the most status that I can try and get to show you guys how effective each of the status procs and elements are against the enemies. So do make sure you put that in mind when you are trying this on other weapons, because for some weapons it may be weaker or it might be less than what is on other weapons. But anyway, the first one is Viral, and this is Cold and Toxic. This is great, as you can see, against pretty much any enemy. Grineer, Corpus, anything of like skin, kind of human-esque enemies is very, very useful against. Infested, it's a little bit weak, and that's because it's kind of the same element. But Viral is very, very strong. Very, very strong indeed. The next one is Gas, and that is Heat and Toxic. And Gas is good against Infested. It's a very good proc. It's a very good status effect. It's decent against Grineer. I would say it's decent at weakening their armor. I don't think it's as effective as Corrosive, as you'll see with a couple of these enemies. But nevertheless, it is a decent status. It's very good against Infested. It's very good against most enemies, really. It does kind of start to teeter out toward the latter stages and the higher enemies. Especially the higher armor Grineer, and you can kind of see it a little bit in the footage as well, that it takes a few more shots than any other status effect and proc. So, but it is very good against Infested, and it deals, I'd say, decent enough damage against the Grineer and the Corpus, as well as the shields. So yeah, it's not bad. It's not a bad status effect. Next one in which I'm doing is Radiation. Radiation is a mix of heat and electricity. Now, for me, Radiation is actually a very good status effect, in my opinion, and proc. I think it's very underused. I think it's one that not many people use and not many people may understand as to what it actually does. So, Radiation is great against machinery. It's great against, especially the Corpus. And the reason as well that the status is very, very good, if you proc high status or you have a weapon with a high status proc, you have a very good chance that the Radiation proc will then confuse that enemy, and in some cases even make them shoot their comrades, colleagues, fellow Grineer, Corpus people. And you'll see the actual status effect on this Grineer at some point. So whenever you get that effect, if there's any other enemies around them, they'll become dazed and confused and start shooting them. So for me, it can have its uses, very much so, and it does very light work of a lot of Corpus. So I would say that Radiation is very underused. Maybe people don't understand exactly how it works, but this is a heads up that, you know, maybe you need to start using it. Very good against shields, it melts shields, and yeah, it's also very good against Eidolons. So if you need another reason to use Radiation, use it for that. Very, very good. Very underused, and who knows, you know, if more enemy types come out, then we may have to use it. The next one is Corrosive. Now for me, this one is probably the strongest status proc in the game. Electricity and Toxic. And for me, this is the strongest because, if many of you players will know, the higher levels that you get to in Warframe means that the enemies have higher armor. That's how it works. Enemies of level 50 and above go off armor. They don't go off health, they don't go off shields or anything like that. They go off armor. And Corrosive is the most effective at basically depleting the armor of the enemy. So it means you're going to kill them quicker. And as you can see, it makes, I would say, out of all of the status procs that I'm showing today, it makes light work of these enemies. And these are level 50s. These are not easy mobs to kill. It makes very light work. So for me, I'd say Corrosive is the most effective and probably the best in the game at the moment. The next one is Magnetic, and Magnetic is very similar in a way to, I would say, Radiation, but it doesn't really have that much of a decent proc. Magnetic is again great for, you know, the Corpus. Anything with a shield is probably better, I would say, than Radiation, but Radiation has a better proc. So it's a bit of a balancing act as to which one you want to choose out of the both. Again, I think it's a very underused status effect, not used a great deal. It does take a while on Grineer and heavy armoured enemies, in a way similar to Radiation again, but for me, I think Radiation is slightly better because it gives you that kind of proc. So, and you suddenly, you know, you think you're going to die. Radiation has the effect that it might just save you if it procs the enemies to make them shoot each other. So, and that's the only way it kind of trumps it on top. Final one is then, it is Blast. And for me, the Blast is a mix between Cold and Heat. For me, Blast is quite underwhelming. And it's probably, I think, one of the weakest status effects and procs in the game. And I say this because the proc itself doesn't really do anything. It will ragdoll enemies around and it's fun to see. But the damage that it actually gives to the enemies doesn't really do enough for you to keep using it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a bad status effect. It has its uses. It's great for like clearing corridors of enemies maybe. But as an effect, it takes a lot longer than most of the other status effects that I've shown. Especially against high armor like the Grineer. And yeah, you'll see the status effect and the proc. It just knocks enemies down without actually dealing a lot of damage to them. Now, you could use it in a mix of another status effect. I think I've got this equipped on my Corinth with another status effect, and it does have its uses. But for me, Blast is a bit of a no-no. It doesn't really do a lot. You know, you've seen a lot of decent numbers here on the enemies, but yeah, maybe added with another status effect, it has its uses, but without that, I would not really say anything about it. If not one of the weakest status effects in the game. So I hope that's kind of been a use to you. I hope that this guide has kind of given you an inkling as to the use of status effects, why it's so strong. Status has always been very strong in Warframe. I think it will continue to do so whilst the enemies are armor-based, unless that changes. So always, status I think is king in Warframe. I think it always will be. So most of the statuses that you will use, you know, you'll have a very good chance of coming out of a gunfight, you know, relatively unscathed. But I hope that this guide has been of use to you. If it has, make sure to hit that follow button. And if you want any more content, make sure to subscribe. It would be much appreciated. And until the next video, I will see you guys very soon. Bye for now.